You guys know that in general I am a very calm person. I usually remain level-headed even in heated situations, even with people I don't particularly like. It's very rare that I get annoyed by things. Now I wouldn't say I'm particularly angry. I'd say I'm probably a little bit more disappointed and bugged by some of the content that I've seen yesterday and today regarding Assassin's Creed, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Obviously, the trailer dropped for Assassin's Creed. We know that the main character is going to be Yasuke. Yasuke is the first black samurai. Now, I was well aware of Yasuke's existence before this even dropped. I know this is the first time that some people are seeing him, but I was well aware of who he was. I was well aware there was an anime on Netflix. I knew that Yasuke already appeared in some video games. I've been well aware of him for a while. I even have the book written on him, which is called like the first black legendary samurai, which I'm going to read a little bit to you guys as well. But I'm very disappointed by some of the things I've been seeing online. Now, I'm going to try and outline this because I know this is a very contentious subject, and I know the minute I say something, someone's going to run to the comment section without letting me finish and start typing a whole bunch of hoo-ha. So I'm going to try and outline this before I get to each statement. Now, there's two sides to this. There's the laziness side of this and the lack of research and the assumptions that have been made about this character. And there is also the unfortunate reality that in Western games, we deal with some bullshit called DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, unfortunately, because of this announcement of the Assassin's Creed game with this individual called Yasuke, who he is seems to have been lost in translation, and I understand the outrage to a certain extent. People have seen a black samurai for a game that is set in feudal Japan, and they have immediately assumed that A, this guy is not who the game is making him out to be, and B, that this is a DEI thing. Now, what I will acknowledge is that the usage of Yasuke in the new Assassin's Creed game might be for nefarious reasons. It might be. I don't know too much about how Ubisoft goes about these things. I don't play Ubisoft games. I don't like Ubisoft games. I'm not going to play this game anyway, but I think the conversation surrounding it is very important because I've seen a lot of content creators that I watch, not necessarily agree with, but I watch their content because I am interested in their takes. Some I agree with and some I don't. But I think because of this whole DEI thing, there has been a knee-jerk reaction to be outraged that there is a black samurai in a game based in feudal Japan. Now, for those of you that don't know who Yasuke is the first black samurai, and I've seen a lot of people saying he was no samurai. That is not true. This man was most definitely a samurai, and it only takes a little Google search or going on YouTube and looking at videos that have been up for 5-10 years about this individual. He is a very well-researched individual. People know who he is. He's well known in Japan. As a matter of fact, when I went to Japan, I saw figurines of Yasuke. I saw posters of Yasuke. People know who he is.
Where is Yasuke in the mind of the present-day Japanese?
Yasuke is pretty well known in Japan. He's not known by everybody, but there's a good huge percentage that do know him. But they know of him as a legend. They know of him as Nobunaga's black samurai or African samurai. That's what they know. More than that, most people are not aware of.
Okay. And
the fact that his character is in computer games, it's in books, it's in anime, it's in manga, mean that they've got... warped is the wrong word because it's all positive, but they have the idea of the manga story or the anime story, not the real story of the real man. The Japanese book, which I published 2 years ago, was an academic book which delved in and in detective work worked out who he was, where he came from, and possibly where he was.
Now, I don't want to come across as condescending in this video, so please don't take it that way, but it seems like some of these content creators, some of them have millions of views, did not bother to do their research whatsoever. They saw a black man on a video game about Japan and they jumped to conclusions. And again, I understand the implications because of Western video games and because of people that work in Sweet Baby Inc., because of companies like Kotaku. I understand that when people saw that, they immediately assumed this person is not who Ubisoft is saying he is. Now, of course, creative liberties are going to be taken in a video game, but I really want to explore some of the things that I've seen online today. So I've acknowledged that DEI exists. I'm not one of these people that defends DEI. If you're new to the channel, you can go through my history. I have called out Kotaku, I have called out Sweet Baby Inc., I have called out individuals supporting them, I called out the wokeness they were trying to inject into Helldivers. I've called out all of that stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and just look at the views that these people are getting for the Outrage content and jump on it as well, because what they're saying is completely inaccurate. Now, thank God I was already clued up on who Yasuke was. Thank God I already bought books surrounding this individual, because I was fascinated about the idea of the Black Samurai. So I'm going to go into it and I'm going to try and explain my stance on this, and why I'm not on the side of some of these content creators who have been saying that Yasuke was not a samurai and he shouldn't be in the game. To start with, this is not the first time that Yasuke has appeared in a video game. Yasuke was in Nioh. He's depicted here. You can see him very clearly. I've played Nioh. I saw Yasuke in that game, very easily identifiable. He's also been in Samurai Warriors. He was depicted in Samurai Warriors. Obviously, the way he looks is going to change between each game. That's true for most samurai historical figures. That's true for Nobunaga. If you look at Nobunaga in some games, he looks like a demon. If you look at him in other games, he looks very different. He'll have very long hair sometimes. In actuality, Nobunaga obviously didn't look like the anime depictions of him, so they take creative liberties with how these characters look. I don't have an issue with that. I don't think most people have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is people seeing the character and without doing any research, just saying things like this. He's probably going to bang the Japanese female character too in the upcoming game. Now, I hate to break it to you guys, but Yasuke probably had sex with multiple Japanese women, because Yasuke had a very close relationship with Nobunaga, and upon one of their first meetings, Nobunaga invited Yasuke to party because he was so fascinated at his size and his stature and his skin color. But we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Stripped down to the waist. He was asked to strip down to the waist, and he was scrubbed. Of course, they didn't come off. So then Nobunaga throws a party for him. He says, "Oh, wow, this amazing guy has come to my court." He gets his sons in, he calls his nobles in, probably calls the ladies in. They have a party, and he's the guest of honor. At the end of this party, he's made a rich man.
But I can only imagine what went on at these parties, at Nobunaga's parties, the top guy in Japan. Don't forget, Nobunaga was the man that almost united Japan. He was the guy. He was the warlord. If he clicked his fingers, you did what he said. So I can only imagine what his parties were like. And he liked Yasuke. Obviously, you get trolls like this. Africans don't have their own accomplishments. We're going to go into the history of Yasuke in just a moment, so we can go over his accomplishments and his near mythical status in Japan, because that's what it was. You've got a picture here saying, "Be a slave. His only job is carrying weapons for other men. The Japanese dress you as a samurai because they think it's funny. End up in battle, immediately surrender. Get enslaved again 300 years later, the legendary Black Samurai." That is a bastardization of the history of Yasuke. Now, you don't have to listen to me, okay? I'm just a gamer on the internet. I just happen to have taken an interest in Yasuke before he became very popular in the West. At least in more recent times, I think people really clocked onto who he was with the Netflix adaptation of an anime that came out, but I was already well aware of who the guy was. I'm going to play you guys some clips so that you can get an understanding of who this individual was.
Let me first start from the most famous foreign samurai, Yasuke. In the Civil War era, many slaves were brought to Japan by European merchants and diplomats. Yasuke was one of those slaves that was brought to Japan by Italian Jesuit. He was born in Africa, where Mozambique is now.
Now, it's very important to note there that Yasuke was a slave going into Japan by some historians' information. It is a little bit muddied. There is information to suggest that by the time he got to Japan, he was no longer a slave.
You said something about the fact that a lot of people, there's a common misconception about Yasuke that he was a slave at the time. So do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure. There's no doubt in my mind that Yasuke was abducted from his home in a slave raid, almost definitely from what is now South Sudan. He was almost definitely a member of the Dinka people, and then he would have been transported through what is modern day Sudan or Ethiopia to get to the Indian Ocean and then taken to India. However, by the time he comes to Japan, I'm almost definite that he was not a slave. He had won his freedom. He had escaped. Unlikely. I think he'd probably won his freedom. In India at this time, slavery normally meant that when your master died, you were automatically freed. That was what happened. It was the law, essentially.
I think one of the things that is said about Yasuke is that he won his freedom. when he was transported to India. In India, in those times, according to some historians, if your master was to pass away, you were essentially a free man. Now there's some stories that say that Yasuke won his freedom and he was able to travel with the Italian Jesuit over to Japan. It's a little bit unclear, but as far as we're aware, by the most studies that I've read, Yasuke was originally a slave, and by the time he actually got to Japan with the Italian Jesuit, he was no longer a conventional slave. Of course, the Jesuit acted as his master, but the Jesuit that he was actually with was against slavery, and so it would have looked really bad on that individual to claim Yasuke as a slave. At this point, obviously, his name is not Yasuke.
Valiano was specifically anti-slavery. It would not have looked good for Valiano to be served by a slave when he made public pronouncements against slavery. And also, at the time, Japanese slavery or slavery in Japan by people under the Portuguese crown, as Valiano was illegal as well.
Yasuke met the strongest samurai at that time, Oda Nobunaga, in 1581. Oda Nobunaga is the first samurai that almost conquered all of Japan. He was called the Devil due to his aggressive attitude and violent nature. This powerful samurai was very interested in his African slave, so he asked the Italian Jesuit to let him stay in Japan. The slave didn't have a name, so Nobunaga decided to call him Yasuke. Yasuke was 182 centimeters in a time when the average height of a man was 154 centimeters. Also, in some historical records, it is explained that Yasuke had strength worth 10 men.
So he says here that Yasuke was 182 centimeters tall, which is 5'9". Some people say that Yasuke was actually 6'2".
Right, he was like about 6'2", and in the book, it said that it was almost like a 7-footer by today's standards.
Yeah.
So which means this man was huge. Like, can you imagine today, 2019, seeing a guy that's 7 feet tall, like towering above you? That was how he looked. Plus he was, I can imagine, jet black, like really, really dark, even darker than I am, maybe like the camera or even this book, potentially, right?
The color of ink. The Japanese sources say the color of black ink, so you can say that.
Right.
And
yes.
don't forget, he had the strength of 10 men.
10 men.
So it's a giant, and he has the strength of 10 men.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean 10 men. It's a euphemism for really, really strong.
Now what you have to understand in those times is that people were much shorter. I went to Japan recently and I don't think I'm particularly tall, but I was taller than a lot of people, but they were much shorter back then. So if Yasuke was 5'9" or 6'2", he would have been looked at as being otherworldly, and that is exactly what happened. If you go and look up the story of Yasuke, when he arrived in Japan, there were crowds flocking around him to the point that apparently, according to some historians, some buildings were knocked over. Some buildings literally collapsed. People were killed and trampled over trying to see Yasuke.
Time Nobunaga arrived in the capital, the streets were already bustling with activity, and enormous crowds were being drawn in by some never-before-seen spectacle. The source of this commotion was none other than Yasuke, whose powerful build and skin tone had captured the attention of the Japanese. The people had never seen a man who looked quite like him, and rumors spread quickly throughout the capital. The sheer numbers that Yasuke drew in were enough to cause riots as members of the crowd trampled over each other just to get a glimpse of the new mythical man. It's been alleged in some historical accounts that buildings may have even collapsed under the weight of the number of people who had gathered in the capital to see him.
Some of their deities were depicted as being black like ink, and so to them, according to historians, he would have been seen as a devil or an angel.
Powerful man was truly surprised and impressed by Yasuke, and he wasn't the only one, as there was a deeper cultural reason as to why Yasuke's skin color would have been seen as favorable. The same charcoal black color was a color often associated with Buddhist statues, and Buddhism was by far one of the most popular religions in Japan. To witness a man with skin color of a Buddha who towered over average people and was strong beyond belief must have been an almost religious experience for the Japanese people.
Now, a lot of people have been online saying that this guy was no warrior, he was no fighter, he was nothing. He was merely a slave for Nobunaga, someone that Nobunaga could point fun at. Now, if you actually go and look up the history of Yasuke, if you read the book that I was mentioning earlier, Nobunaga apparently became very fond of this guy to the point that they would spend a lot of time together.
And we know that he was entertaining. He had a good nature. He was Nobunaga loved talking with him. Is what one of the sources said. He couldn't stop talking with him. He was literally obsessed by the conversations.
He was also a very honest and hardworking man. So he was officially allowed by Oda Nobunaga to carry katanas like samurais and own his own house.
Handing your katanas to somebody at that point in Japan was a high honor. To be given a house was a high honor. And to be regarded as a retainer for Nobunaga was a high honor. People that are saying that he was just a slave don't know what they're talking about.
Yasuke would even hold Nobunaga's weaponry from time to time, which was a very honorable job because it meant that he was truly trusted. This means that Yasuke was in a much higher rank than most Japanese at that time.
Now I want to play this clip here for you guys because I find this clip very, very interesting in what this person is saying. I'm going to break it down and then we're going to go into a little bit more of the history of Yasuke and his relationship to Nobunaga and what he was doing when he was in Nobunaga's company and what his status was, because again, a lot of the videos and a lot of the outrage right now is surrounding the fact that this guy was no warrior, he was not respected, he was just a joke that eventually went into battle and was captured and enslaved again.
We got our first look at the new Assassin's Creed game, and I gotta say, man, I'm not impressed. I'm actually just really annoyed right now. We have two main protagonists, one female, one male, just like Odyssey. We're gonna be using Neo, I hope I said that right, a female Japanese character. And for the male character, they're gonna be using Yasuke. Now, I'm annoyed because they're using Yasuke, and I'm gonna tell you why. Yasuke is what they want to say is the first black Japanese samurai, when in all actuality, he was not even a samurai. He was a retainer, so he wasn't even a full-blown samurai.
Alright, let me just stop you right there. People keep saying retainers are not samurai, and I don't think that these people know what retainers are. Now, in samurai culture, retainers were often used to secure the future of a clan in case the daimyo died. You only got to be a retainer if you were seen as somebody that was extremely loyal. For example, Toyotomi Hideyoshi was Nobunaga's retainer. I'm sure a lot of you know that name. Hideyoshi is the guy that went on to unite Japan. There is a statue erected of him just outside Osaka Castle. Tokugawa was Hideyoshi's retainer. What are all of these guys? They are samurai. So people saying he wasn't a samurai, he was a retainer. A retainer can be a samurai. The word is literally just used to secure a clan's future in case the top guy perished. Why are people saying retainers are not samurai? That makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, you can even go and watch animes and they depict it this way. Just go and watch One Piece. Oden's retainers are samurai. So if Yasuke was not a samurai, neither was Hideyoshi. And obviously, that is not true. For example, I believe it was called Kashinden and it was an institution of retainers. Now this later became a class of samurai. So there was different classes, there was different ranks, but simply saying retainers are not samurai is not true. I would highly advise anyone that hasn't seen the Netflix show The Age of Samurai, which depicts 150 years of civil war in Japan, go and watch it. I don't mean to sound condescending, but people are talking about their ass, and I understand you see a black guy on the cover of a game about Japan and you instantly flip out, and I get it because of all the DEI stuff. It's easy to go down that road, but there's no point in making outrage content when factually everything is online for you to see.
And for all of the characters they could have used for Japan, all these kind of different people they could have picked from, they picked Yasuke. Why do they pick Yasuke? Because he's black.
They picked Yasuke because he is a very, very popular figure. Yasuke is well known in Japan. As a matter of fact, when I went into one shop, we were looking for Pokemon cards, and I walked into a shop on my own whilst my friends were looking around, and I noticed the picture of Yasuke, and I was like, oh, Yasuke, and the guy was like, yeah, Yasuke, we love Yasuke, blah, blah, blah. Now, obviously, I'm not talking for the whole of Japan. I'm not saying the whole of Japan loves this guy, I don't know. But I've met enough Japanese people that don't seem to have a problem with him. And even when I'm looking online, when I'm seeing Twitter responses, which we're going to get into a little bit, there's quite a few Japanese people that seem very confused at the outrage. And I'm actually going to get to somebody that was directly related to, I believe, a member of Nobunaga's army, maybe ranking at like general by today's standards. We're going to get there in a little bit to see what her response is.
So in context, that doesn't matter to me, because in all the Assassin's Creed games, every single character has been of some kind of different race and nationality, so that doesn't matter to me. That's fine. But you have to understand what day and age we're in. You have to understand the kind of social shit that they want to try to get across in these video games now.
And this is why I sympathize with a lot of the outrage. I understand the knee-jerk reaction when you see a black man on a game that is depicting Japan. I understand what is going on here. I have made videos previously saying that, look, I don't like gender bending, I don't like race swapping, I don't like a lot of the things that are being inserted into our games. I'm very much against Kotaku, I'm against Sweet Baby Inc. So I get it. When people saw it, I understand the outrage, especially because Assassin's Creed has followed a theme where the person that you're playing as represents the country, as in they're born in that country. And obviously this is slightly deviating from that. But again, the things that people are saying are just not true. And again, I want to reiterate, Yasuke was a samurai. He was the black samurai.
So instead of using a Japanese man in a game based in Japan, like they did with the other Assassin's Creed games, Altair, he was an Arab, obviously. One of my favorites, Connor, in Assassin's Creed 3, he was Native American, that was fine. And the most famous of them all, Ezio Auditore, who was Italian. So why in all those games would you have a character representative of the region they're from? But in this game, you want to demote a Japanese man and then use Yasuke. I understand why, we know why, but they're not going to tell you why, because if you call it out, you're some kind of ist or phobe or whatever. And since I'm black and I'm calling it out, that means that I must hate my skin or something. You know how they do.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think you hate your skin. I think that we've had a lot of bullshit to deal with within our games and in our media in the West, and I think people have seen this and had a knee-jerk reaction. The other possibility is that Ubisoft is using this as part of their DEI as a nefarious way to use somebody that actually existed in Japan, did have that rank, to push some sort of agenda. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. My issue with this argument is more around the framing and the history of Yasuke and making out like he was just a slave. I'm not going to be one of those people that sees all of the views that people are getting for this, because there are hundreds and thousands of views coming in of people outraged and being like, do you know what, I can make a quick buck off this. There's no point in bastardizing the history around this individual, and he is very, very well documented. There are books that have been written about him, historians have spoken about him verbatim for years. Forget all of this stuff that we see on YouTube. This guy's story is in your local library. You can go on YouTube and you can look at videos that talk about this guy in length, documentaries about his life. Now, some information does vary. His height varies, for example. Some people say he's 5'9", some people say 6'2". Some people say the average height of a Japanese man at that time was 5'2", some people say 5 foot. But the fact of the matter is that even though there are small variants in the information surrounding this guy, they all lead to one road. We're going to get there in a little bit. We're going to go over more of his history and some of the outrage online. Going to be responding to some comments, but I'm going to let this guy finish.
I just see this and my immediate thought is they did this for brownie points. I can't think of any other reason why you would have a Assassin's Creed game based in Japan, which we've been clamoring for since the beginning of Assassin's Creed, and then have the main protagonist that is a male be black. I see that and I'm like, there's no other reason than I want claps for it. There's no other reason. And I'm an Assassin's Creed fan. I've played every game. I love every game. And one of my favorite characters is actually Cassandra from Odyssey. So nobody can sit here and say, I don't like women or I don't like diverse people or whatever, when one of my favorite characters is diverse. Hell, Connor Kenway and Hatham Kenway, those are some of my favorite characters from Assassin's Creed. So before the idiots want to start, that's not the reason. The reason is I see straight through this bullshit and I know exactly why they picked this character. It's annoying. That's like if Ghost of Tsushima, instead of using Jin, they used a white dude. People would be like, that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense to me. It's stupid. I know exactly why they're doing it. I see straight through it. It's annoying. It's pandering. It doesn't do anything for me but piss me off.
Now again, I kind of sympathize with this guy because of all the nonsense that we've had in our video games. I understand why people saw this and they got angry immediately. I even spoke to somebody today that said to me, did you see that black samurai in a Japanese game? And I said, yeah, I played along. I played stupid. I was like, yeah, what do you think about it? They were like, it was just dumb. Why would there be a black samurai in Japan? And immediately I rolled my eyes. Because it's like, the internet is there. You can just look these things up. It doesn't take that long. What's the point in being outraged when there is data to support some of the things that people are saying on the contrary about Yasuke? What's the point in being outraged when there's nothing to really be outraged about? The problem is here is that when you are outraged about these sort of things, it muddies the waters for when something nefarious is taking place. Now, I'm not saying they didn't use Yasuke as a perfect opportunity to maybe push some DEI, because I don't know what's going to actually be in the game. Yasuke's existence and him being the Black Samurai, that is factual. That's not up for debate. Like I said, I will point to plenty of channels. I will link them in the description below. I will link the book about Yasuke. I will even link the original Japanese academic telling of Yasuke's story. So him being who they say he is not up for debate, but we don't know what's going to be in the Assassin's Creed game. We don't know how they're going to depict him. They could do all sorts of things. Of course, it's a work of fiction. Even though he's a real person, much like Nobunaga is, they take creative liberties with these people. We've seen Nobunaga depicted as a demon plenty of times. Obviously, that was his nickname when he was alive, but he was not actually a demon. Even the way they show him to be a very towering, imposing figure in some video games, in actuality, at that time, Japanese men were even shorter than what they are now, obviously, and he was much smaller than what they make him out to be. So I want to get onto some responses that he received under his Twitter post before we get into more of Yasuke's history. Jesus said, so like if someone wanted to make a Yasuke game, how would they make the Yasuke game without him being black? Kaida, who is the individual we just watched on the video, said, a non-Assassin's Creed game? I don't see the issue. You clearly don't understand the position. Gizor said, what if the Assassin's Creed team wanted to make an Assassin's Creed game about Yasuke because they thought he was cool? How would they do that? Fair question to ask. Kaida says they would do what they're doing now, obviously, and get the same response. Gizor says, so they can't make an Assassin's Creed game about Yasuke, who was a real person, without being called pandering racist, because instead of just playing the game, or at least hoping it's good, you choose to engage in rage-fueled rejection based on how close to reality a fantasy game is. And I think that's a perfect response. How do you make a Yasuke game without thinking that it's racist pandering? How do you go about that? If this guy was truly a historical figure, if he was a samurai, how do you go about making that game? I mean, I didn't really hear this outrage when the series came out on Netflix. I didn't hear this outrage when he was depicted in Neo. I didn't hear this outrage for Samurai Warriors 5. I didn't hear this outrage when he's been depicted in multiple other things. Now, before we go on to the next tweet, I just want to let you guys know, The Last Samurai is my favorite film of all time, and Tom Cruise is my favorite actor. Okay, Tom Cruise is my favorite actor. The Last Samurai is my favorite film. So this is not like I hate the film or I hate Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise has starred in some of my favorite films even outside of The Last Samurai. My favorite series is Mission Impossible. I have no issue with Tom Cruise and I absolutely love The Last Samurai. I think it's the greatest film ever made. It's got an amazing soundtrack. However, this individual perfectly states, it's funny because I've never seen you complain about Tom Cruise's The Last Samurai. Kaida says, why would I? Why would you complain about The Last Samurai? What do you mean? What are you on about? Why wouldn't you complain about it? Using the logic of Yasuke, how could you not complain about Tom Cruise's depiction of The Last Samurai? First of all, The Last Samurai is not even remotely close to what happened. Not even remotely close. It is a fictional retelling. There wasn't a white man there in that fashion. Now, there was a white samurai who was originally a pirate, and that is who the individual is loosely based off in the Neo games. I believe his name is William. If I'm remembering correctly, his name was William Adams. He was an Englishman that went to Japan. He was stranded on the island, and he settled into Japan, and over time he began to train with the samurai and he became a samurai. So there was an English individual, a white man, that became a samurai, but the storytelling in The Last Samurai, first of all, has nothing to do with William Adams. There is no historical relevancy to how that battle played out. It is heavily fabricated. Obviously, Tom Cruise's character was not the Last Samurai. I think what the film was trying to depict is that he got to see the Last Samurai. Even that is historically inaccurate. But in Ueno Park, I've been to Ueno Park before, that's in Tokyo, there is a statue, there's a monument of an individual called Takamori. Takamori was the last samurai of Japan, and they celebrated him by creating a monument in his name. And there is a character in The Last Samurai. He is in the film for a substantial amount of it. He's a supporting character in the film, but again, the way the story is told is mostly fabricated. So if we are cool with Tom Cruise's very loose telling of The Last Samurai, so loose that it's basically just fictional, why are we not cool with Yasuke, who was also a real person? And as far as we are aware right now, we don't know how loose they're going to be with the storytelling in this. So surely the energy should be the same, no? If we accept Tom Cruise, which I do, like I said, it's my favorite film, then we accept Yasuke, no? What would be the issue there? How about the main character in Neo? He was also somebody that is loosely based off somebody that actually existed, right? William Adams, a white man taking up the samurai title. I didn't see any outrage for it. As a matter of fact, I didn't even see any outrage for Yasuke, who was in that game. Didn't hear nothing about it. aspect. Now again, if you don't understand what a Japanese retainer is, it is a vassal in feudal Japan, and it is usually a samurai providing military services. A samurai. So again, retainers could be samurais. People that are saying that he was just a retainer, you sound stupid. This individual perfectly points out here, a retainer was a samurai class in most cases. Also, you're talking about a guy who served Nobunaga. Why the hell wouldn't you want a video game about this dude? Kaede says, I wouldn't mind a video game on him, just not the first Assassin's Creed based in Japan. What does that matter if it's an Assassin's Creed game? The problem here is that they're trying to make out like Yasuke being the protagonist in a game based in Japan has something to do with pandering. How could it have something to do with pandering if it is historically accurate to the point that he was a samurai? They're saying he wasn't a samurai. People are saying he's a slave. People are saying that he was just Nobunaga's plaything, that they just dressed him up, that they were taking the piss out of him. That is not the case. Now, like I said, I already owned the book, which is called African Samurai, The True Story of Yasuke, a legendary black warrior in feudal Japan, and it was written by Thomas Lockley and Jeffrey Girard. I would highly recommend you purchase this book. You can get it on Amazon for about £15. It is a very good book. But I'm going to read to you something that Nobunaga said to him. Now obviously they used to journal a lot back in those times. They would have people that would journal for them. Nobunaga said to Yasuke on the battlefield, "You are my black warrior, the demon who will ride beside me into battle, the dark angel who protects me and my family up in my home." He then pointed to Yasuke's sword and he said, "The sword is a symbol of this. You are my samurai now." He said this to him on the battlefield.
Yasuke's unique appearance might have been what caught Nobunaga's eye to begin with, but it was the man's proficiency with weapons and his liveliness as a conversation partner that kept his lord's attention. In time, and in much the same way that Toyotomi Hideyoshi was appointed Nobunaga's sandal bearer, Yasuke was made to be Nobunaga's weapon bearer. The sudden promotion made Yasuke a high-ranking retainer of Nobunaga's court and effectively a samurai. Yasuke was later given retainers of his own by Nobunaga, as was customary for any man of status at the time. But the true mettle of a samurai is decided on the battlefield, and when Oda Nobunaga made his push to defeat the Takeda clan, Yasuke marched off to war with his forces. Yasuke fought beside Nobunaga in this lengthy campaign against Takeda Katsuyori, which culminated in Nobunaga's decisive victory in the bloody battle of Tenmokuzan.
Quarterin's takes, I don't find all of them to be bad. I think he has pretty good takes, but someone mentions Tom Cruise here and he just says this is a bad faith argument.
People are also using this. If you're upset about that, what about when a white man played a samurai in a movie? Also dumb. Okay? Also dumb. Also dumb. But I'm pretty sure when Tom Cruise did it, it wasn't to meet diversity quotas. It's a little different. It's a dumb argument that doesn't actually go anywhere. It's bad faith.
Why is it a bad faith argument? What are we talking about here? What is the point in muddying the waters and being outraged for no reason? It makes no sense. It just emboldens the other side because all that they end up seeing is a bunch of people that are just losing their mind over nothing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Yasuke being the lead in this game. There isn't whatsoever. I actually got some tweets here from some Japanese individuals that I'm going to show you guys. You have this person here from Japan saying, "I didn't know there were people like this. This person has strong protagonist vibes." Obviously he's referring to the outrage that has been caused by Yasuke being the main character. You have Fujikake Rin here, I hope I'm saying that name correctly, that says, "The Yasuke was a retainer so he wasn't a samurai argument makes me roll my eyes so much. I'm descended from Fujikage Nagakatsu, who was a retainer of Oda Nobunaga. Absolutely a samurai. Why are people like this?" This individual is a descendant from somebody that was a retainer for Nobunaga, telling you that they were samurais. Who told you guys that retainers are not samurais? You imbeciles realize that companies like Kotaku and Sweet Baby Inc. will see this and go, "Look at these idiots," because you're acting like buffoons right now. Yeah, we don't like Ubisoft. Yes, DEI exists. We've acknowledged all of that, but you need to know when to pick your battles. You've got the Japanese rolling their eyes at us. Then you've got this individual who tweeted here, which I've translated into English, and it says, "Yasuke has been featured in a lot of fiction, so I thought he would be well known, but maybe he's actually quite unknown. During the Sengoku period, he was sent to Japan as a slave. His black skin was unusual and he was taken in by Nobunaga. He was given a name and became a samurai, and he was a candidate for Castle Lord. He was on Nobunaga's side during the Honnoji incident. He was overlooked by Akechi Mitsuhide. His whereabouts are unknown after that. It's such a romantic story, no wonder he's the main character." And this is Yasuke being depicted in loads of forms of media. He is not unknown to the Japanese. This is not some disrespect to Japanese people. Pick your battles, guys. Now I understand there's been plenty of bastardizations of black people in the media. I've seen that film, The Woman King. I knew the history of the Dahomies before I went in to watch that film. I understand that they absolutely rewrote history of that film. I know that things did not go down that way. That whole film is silly from beginning to end. But people saying that Yasuke was not a samurai, people saying that Yasuke was not high class, there are historians that have covered this guy for years. There are so many books on him. What are you guys talking about? A lot of these content creators that I watch, I've got to say I'm very disappointed, because even though I have been on here saying that I'm very much against DEI, I'm very much against Kotaku, I'm against Sweet Baby Inc., I'm actually against the bullshit that they're doing. But there's no point in just creating videos literally to farm views. That's what you guys have done. You saw a black man on the cover, and yes, there's going to be situations where I see a black man on the cover and I'm like, what are we doing here? For example, if there is a Superman game and I see Denzel Washington's face on it, then I'm going to go, what the hell's going on here? Superman is a white man. Yes, I know he's an alien, but he's been depicted as a white man. Same goes for Batman. Same goes for Goku. There are times and there are places when their outrage is needed. This was not one of them. Next time you guys open your mouth about what a retainer is, or what a samurai is, or who Yasuke was, do your research. I understand, again, because of all the DEI stuff that is going on in the media these days, it's very quick to have knee-jerk reactions. But if you're not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to the main character in Shogun, who is a white dude, if you're not going to have an outraged reaction to Tom Cruise and him being the last person to see the last samurai on the battlefield, what are we doing here? What about Neo? Not outraged about that at all. You can't just see something and just put out nonsense content to your viewers, because they're going to listen to what you have to say. And I'm not saying you got to be accurate across the board. I'm sure there's things that I've goofed up plenty of times. I'm not saying that at all. But the way people were talking, I encourage you guys to go and watch some of these videos. The outrage is all over YouTube, and whilst I usually agree with some of these guys, I gotta say this was a massive L on their part. Read a book next time, guys. Honestly, you muddy the waters when you do dumb shit like this. There are so many videos where you can learn so much about Yasuke and his legendary journey through Japan. And yes, there is some conflicting information. Like we've played in this video before, we don't actually know if he made it to the Battle of Yamasaki. We don't know if he was recaptured and sent back to the Jesuits. We don't know if he was murdered with Nobunaga.
One account of the Battle of Yamazaki tells a different, more glorious story. The Battle of Yamasaki took place only 13 days after the betrayal and slaughter of Hononji, and was set in motion as soon as Toyotomi Hideyoshi intercepted a letter from Akechi Mitsuhide's forces that revealed the traitor's plans to send his forces after Hideyoshi next. The peasant-born samurai lord Toyotomi Hideyoshi led the forces of the Oda clan against Mitsuhide, and over the course of his decisive battle was able to avenge Nobunaga and secure his position as his former lord's successor. A great many of Nobunaga's former allies participated in this fight to defeat Akechi Mitsuhide. And it's even said that manning one of the cannons for the Oda clan on that side of the battle was a man with a, quote, coal complexion. This man might have been the Black Samurai, who out of loyalty to his fallen lord left the Jesuits and sought out the banner of Hideyoshi, another of Nobunaga's long shots, in order to provide his prowess in battle against the traitorous enemy that had struck down his friend and leader.
The stories are very iffy, but what we do know is this guy was revered by the Japanese people back then. He was seen as someone as almost godlike, and he was friends with Nobunaga. That has been well documented. Nobunaga was very fascinated with him. Yes, he told him to wash his skin because he'd never seen a black man before. Imagine being a Japanese dude on an island, and this dude who is like 10 times your size, both in height and muscle mass, walks over to you and he has black skin like the Buddhas in your temple. Yeah, you're gonna be like, hold on a second, what the hell is going on here? Nobunaga was very fascinated with new things. That's why he pioneered so many things. That's why he was able to produce as many guns as he was able to. That's why he was able to lead an army in the way he did. That's why he was almost able to unite Japan. Yes, he was a very ruthless man. I'm not saying that he was a good person, but he did not see Yasuke and treat him as a slave. He treated him as a friend. He gave him money. He gave him a lot of money. He gave him a house. I imagine he probably gave him women, and he gave him the honor and the class and the prestige of being a samurai. So that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video. A little bit disappointed by some of the nonsense I've seen, because I'm on the same page as these guys when it comes to DEI stuff, but you need to know when to pick your battles. You could have made videos saying this could be for nefarious means without completely invalidating the existence of somebody that had a legendary life and something worth talking about. I encourage people to read the book. I've linked in the description below. I think the book is awesome, and I hope that Assassin's Creed is good, although I ain't got my hopes up for that. I don't really like the Assassin's Creed games, but maybe we'll get a proper Yasuke game later down the line. Take care, guys, and peace.